Hi everyone and welcome to this Fan Art Friday video. I recently realised that it's been such a long time since I've worked on any Overwatch drawings, so I thought it'd be fun this week to work on a drawing of D.Va. I opted for a 3/4 angled portrait inside a comic panel. I wanted the wind to be blowing her hair so that the hair could overlap the comic panel and help create that 3D effect. And it was actually the hair that ended up taking the most time, trying to kind of fit it into the layout so that there were kind of equal amounts of background on both sides, and just trying to create a nice composition within the comic panel. I chose to use my Copic Multiliner SP 0.03mm for the pen outlines. I love to spend extra time on the outlines, making sure the lines are as smooth as possible. So for details like the hair and the eyelashes especially, I like to really spend time on each individual eyelash, making sure it's as sharp as possible. And then also for the fine hair overlapping the comic panel, it's details like this where this pen is super helpful, and it just adds another level of depth and detail. Once I was happy with the outlines, it was then time for the colouring, and for the colouring of this drawing I used Copic Markers along with some Prismacolor pencils to add some extra layers of detail. And I started with the skin tones first, adding pinkish white and then adding a layer of pale heath over the top of that as well to add a warmer tone. I added extra layers of pale heath as well around her eyes, underneath her nose and mouth and underneath her hair to add some shading, and then to build up that shading I added a layer of pale grape. To start adding some warmer tones, mainly around her nose, I started placing a blush marker, also adding this around her eyes, around the eyelids and around the outside of her face. And then to smooth the gradient of this kind of blushed skin tone so that it matched the rest of the skin, I started using some Prismacolor pencils, those being blush pink and pink. It was also at this point that I decided I wanted to add some highlights to her skin, using a mixture of a white Prismacolor pencil and a Uni-Ball Signo Broad white ink pen. Once I completed the skin tones, it was then time for me to work on her eyes, starting with the inner corners first and using a light pink marker for this. And then for the irises I used a mixture of maroon and champagne, also blending in a little bit of light pink just to try and match the warm skin tones. I added some highlights to the irises as well with the white Prismacolor pencil and the highlighter pen, followed by adding shading to the whites of the eyes with all the cool grey markers, just trying to keep a nice smooth gradient to this shading. And then once all of this colouring and shading had been placed, I added some bright highlights with the highlighter pen. For her lips, I added a base layer of colour with pale heath, and built up a couple of extra layers of colour with tender pink and blush. Then I added shading with a mixture of pale grape and light grape. Also making sure to add some bright highlights to the lips as well with the white Prismacolor pencil and the highlighter pen. When it came to working on her eyebrows, I added a base layer of colour with champagne and maroon, and then I started placing some Tuscan red and white Prismacolor pencils over the top to add the texture, and it was at this point that I realised how I wanted to work on her hair. But before working on her hair, I needed to add the face paint. To start adding the outlines of her face paint, I used a processed red, and then for the colouring in between all these outlines, I used my cerise marker, also placing some shading with a mulberry Prismacolor pencil. With the colouring of D.Va's face completed, it was then time for me to work on her hair, starting with champagne and maroon markers first, and just building up the layers of shading with them, and then later on using a dark bark marker to add even darker layers of shading, mainly towards the right side. I wanted to keep the left side nice and highlighted, and I wanted to follow the same theme of adding warm tones, so I started placing some light pink marker over the top of this, also then bringing out the blush pink, pink, processed red and mulberry Prismacolor pencils to start adding streaks of colour with them, and also made use of my Uni-Ball highlighter pen to add a bunch of highlights, mainly towards the left side. When it came to working on her headset, I mainly used cool grey markers, ranging between cool grey 3, 5 and 7. For the green colouring I used an apple green, for the yellow colouring I used honey, and then for the pink colouring I used the same cerise marker that I used for her face paint. After that I made sure to use my Uni-Ball highlighter pen and the white Prismacolor pencil to add a bunch of highlights, but not just for the highlights, but also to add some scratchy textures to all of the surfaces. And I actually used the same colouring technique for her suit as well, with the cool grey markers and the cerise marker, and then building up all the levels of detail and the highlights with a mixture of the white Prismacolor pencil and the highlighter pen. After that, it was time for the final stages of this drawing, and I used a light hydrangea to add a background, and then I added some particle effects with a mixture of the cerise and the Uni-Ball highlighter pen. I also used the highlighter pen to add a highlight going all the way around D.Va, and then I used it to add some environment effects by adding some streaks right across the page. And after that, this drawing was completed. Overall, it took about 6.5 hours to complete, and it was super fun to finally work on another Overwatch drawing. I'm so glad that I finally tried this one, and I really want to know what you think, so please let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you have any suggestions for future drawings that you'd like to see, if you'd like to see any fan art or fantasy art or any tutorials. Any suggestions at all are hugely appreciated. If you want to see more drawings like this, then make sure you're subscribed, and any likes or shares on this video, they really mean a lot to me. If you'd like to follow my progress and see any progress photos before I post these videos, then make sure to check out the links in the description box below to check out my Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And once again, thank you so much for watching this, and thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it. I hope you're having an awesome day, and I'll see you all soon.